Hey, what's going on, guys, and welcome back to another video, and today we're going to be talking about Star Wars Squadrons. Now, this new Star Wars game that focuses on space combat just came out, and honestly, there's a lot going on. So today, we're going to have a very basic overview of some of the basic controls and just how to navigate your cockpit and know what is going on in the game. Note that in this video, we are not going to talk about different weapon types, customization options, any of that. It is just going to be a very basic overview of the game, the different types of ships, and how to navigate your cockpit and how to do power management. Now, if you find this guide helpful, please go ahead and drop a like. It makes me feel good to know that I'm helping you guys, and it helps other people find the video. And if you feel so inclined, hit subscribe and the notification bell so you get notifications for any new videos. And without any further ado, let's get into the video. All right, now the first thing I want to talk about is just to give you a little bit of advice that I learned whenever I first started playing the game. Now, if you like to play fight simulators like Ace Combat, Microsoft Flight Simulator, or even Star Wars Battlefront 2's Starfighter Assault, you might think you have a pretty good handle on how to play flight simulator games and how you should have the controls down. So you might be, like me, and before you even play, go in and try to fiddle with the controls to make them match the flight simulator that you are most accustomed to. Let me tell you right away, do not do that. It turns out the developers that made this game did actually have a reason that they made the controls the way they did, and some of the controls don't work as intended if you switch them away from their original configuration. So go ahead, try to get accustomed to the way the controls work in the game. For example, if you play Ace Combat and you're used to pitching and rolling with the same stick on your left stick, note that that does not work the same in Star Wars Squadrons. So please go ahead, give the original controls a chance. Now, whenever you play Star Wars Squadrons, you will have two options for which faction you're going to play as. You can play as the Galactic Empire, or you can play as the New Republic. Each faction has 4 different ships that you can play as. For the New Republic, you have the X-Wing, the Y-Wing, the A-Wing, and the U-Wing. And then for the Empire, you have the TIE Fighter, the TIE Interceptor, the TIE Bomber, and the TIE Reaper. Now, each of these different types of ships have different roles that they can play in the game. You have the multi-role fighter, which is going to be your X-Wing and your TIE Fighter. They're kind of jack of all trades. They're not really specific at doing anything. They can kind of do everything decently. So they can go after ship-to-ship combat, or they can go after capital ships and corvettes. They are outfitted to do either. Your Y-Wing and TIE Bomber are going to be your bomber class. They're going to have higher hull strength and shields, but they're going to have less maneuverability, so they're not going to be as adept as ship-to-ship combat. They can still be effective, but that's not what they're designed for. Their use is usually to go after corvettes, frigates, and capital ships. They also get really nice countermeasures that are very effective at going at these kinds of targets. Now, your A-Wing and TIE Interceptor are going to be your fighter class. They excel in ship-to-ship combat. They're going to be very maneuverable, have very nice weapons and countermeasures for ship-to-ship combat. However, their hull strength is going to be very low, so it doesn't take a whole lot to take them out. So I wouldn't probably use those against a capital ship. However, they can still be effective. Finally, you have your support class ships, which are going to be the U-Wing and the TIE Reaper. And as you might guess, these are going to specialize at supporting your allies, from healing and restocking their supplies, to dealing normal damage and destroying enemies, or dealing ion damage and disabling enemies. These ships don't necessarily specialize in anything, but they can definitely turn the tide in battle if used effectively. Now, aside from some minor differences such as stat differences and different weapons that are available for each type of ship, the major difference between the Empire and the Rebel ships is that the Rebel ships all have shield generators, whereas the Empire ships do not necessarily have that. The TIE Reaper is the only ship that has shields for the Empire. That might sound a little overpowered that the Rebels have shields, but we'll talk about in a little while why that's not necessarily the case. Now, to start off, we're just going to talk about different pieces of your cockpit so you can get to be familiar with your surroundings and the different visuals you will have to work with. For the clips in this video, I do have it set to instruments only mode so you can become familiar with the different parts of your cockpit, and we're not going to be distracted by the other parts of your HUD. Now, whenever you first start playing, I definitely do not recommend using instruments only mode. Use the other aspects of your HUD for targeting and to get you acclimated to the game, but afterwards, go ahead and switch over to instruments only, as it is kind of fun and it does allow for a more immersive experience. It is also important to note that the different ships do have slightly different cockpit layouts, but for the most part, once you become familiar with one, they all look pretty similar, and it should be pretty easy to switch from ship to ship. Now, the first piece of your cockpit that we're going to talk about is in the upper left-hand corner, and that is going to be your radar. Your radar is obviously going to give you kind of the lay of the land and tell you where all of the different landmarks are, such as enemy ships, allied ships, resupplies, etc. When you're not playing in instruments only mode, any ship that you target will have an arrow pointing to them on your HUD, but in instruments only mode, you will need to use your radar to locate any different types of enemies. Enemies appear as red blips on your radar, and as you can see, any targeted enemy will have a square around them to indicate that that is your current target that you're going after. This is probably already clear, but just to mention it, whenever your enemy is within that inner circle of your radar, that means they are right in front of you and you should be able to see them. Resupply points and allied capital ships will also appear, as you can see on the radar, allowing you to find your allies and go back to restock or resupply. Next up, let's talk about your shield display indicator. In the top right hand corner, you'll see in green your ship, and you'll see 2 green semicircles around them. Those are your shield indicators. As you begin to take damage, you will notice that those semicircles will begin to recede. Whenever those semicircles disappear, that means that you have no more shields left on either your front or your back, and you will begin to take hull damage. Important to note that shields will recharge, whereas hull damage cannot be repaired without the use of some sort of countermeasure. So it is important to keep an eye on your shields and try to keep them up whenever possible to keep your hull integrity as high as possible. Now if you look towards the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, you will start to see some blue rectangles. That is going to be your engine control. Adjacent to those blue rectangles, you will see a number, and that is telling you your current speed. You can adjust your speed using the left analog stick. And it's important to note that whenever you're in that middle square, that big square, that is going to be whenever you are the most maneuverable. So if you need to make any sort of tight turns or try to make any sort of maneuvers, you want to be kind of in that sweet spot in the middle. If you are going at max speed or if you're going at minimum speed, then you are going to turn a lot slower. Next up, if you look to the right of your radar, you will see a sequence of red dots. That is going to be your weapon charge indicator. Whenever those lights begin to turn off, that is representing your weapon charge being depleted. And when all of the lights turn off, you're going to fire very slowly, and you will need to let them recharge if you want to be doing any sort of real damage. Now to the right of your weapon charge indicator, you're going to see some different symbols and bars or numbers next to them. Those are going to be your available countermeasures and auxiliaries and the amount you have left. For example, you can see that my droid is fully charged and available to fix my hull if need be. I have 4 countermeasures left for evading missiles, and I have 6 concussion missiles ready to go to be used. It's important to note that once all of these items are used, some will recharge like the droid, but others that have numbers next to them will not. The only way to restore those is via a support ship, a supply drop somewhere on the battlefield, or a supply ship, or to dock at your capital ship. It's important to note that docking at your capital ship will fully heal your hull and it will refresh all of your supplies, so it's definitely something to remember when you're playing the game. Now below your weapon charge indicator and your auxiliaries, you're going to see your targeting computer. The targeting computer is going to display the type of enemy that you're going after, such as a TIE bomber, plus the name of the person you're going after if you're doing PvP combat. You will also see a number that is representing their hull integrity, and if you're going up against a rebel ship or a TIE Reaper, you will also see the shield strength of that ship as well. The number on the bottom is showing your distance to the current target, and that's important to consider because a lot of weapons have different distance ranges in which they are effective or even function. You can change your current target or pick up a target by using X on your DualShock. You can also press L2 to target the item that is currently in front of you, whether that be an enemy or friendly. Yes, you can target allies because that will give you information as to their shield strength or their hull integrity, and it's also useful for support ships, as you have to target allies if you're going to use your auxiliaries to heal them. Now whenever you press X on your DualShock to get a new target, it's going to do it based on whatever the targeting parameters are set. You can change your automatic targeting parameters by holding L2. That will bring up a targeting selection window. In that radial window, you can select the type of enemy or objective, call it what you will, that will automatically be selected whenever you press X on the DualShock. Or A if you're using an Xbox controller, don't want to leave anyone out. Now to the left of your targeting computer, you will see a series of blue, red, and green circles, and this represents your power management system. What's very interesting is that in Star Wars Squadrons, you are allowed to divert the power of your ship to different parts of your ship, such as the engines, the weapon systems, and your shields, that is blue, red, and green going from left to right. You can do this using the left, the up, and the right buttons on the D-pad respectively. If you hit down on the D-pad, that will rebalance out your power management system. Power management is very important within the game because it will allow you to focus on certain parts of your ship, and it will also allow you to overcharge different parts of your ship. For example, if I shift all power to my engines, not only will my ship go faster, I will begin to charge up my boost, and then when pressing L3, I can actually boost to get a super boost of speed, and I can even drift, which is a little more advanced, and we'll talk about that later. If I shift power to my weapons, not only will they drain slower, but I can also overcharge my weapons, meaning that they'll deal more damage when overcharged. Finally, if I shift all of my power to my shields, you will notice an extra bar going around which represents overcharged shields. It's important to note that once you overcharge one of your subsystems, that charge does not automatically go away as soon as you change it to another. So for example, if I overcharge my weapons and I get that bright red bar to show that I've overcharged them, as soon as I switch to shields, it doesn't necessarily deplete immediately. Now that being said, overcharged systems will degrade over time and go back to normal. So if I overcharge my weapons at the very beginning of battle, after a couple of minutes, they will go automatically back to normal without doing anything. Now that we've talked about power management, let's talk about shield management. Now, one thing that is also really nice about Star Wars Squadrons is that you have the ability to shift the power of your shields between the front and the back of your ship. For example, if you're in a Y-Wing and you're going straight at an Imperial Star Destroyer, you can likely think that you're going to take a lot more damage from the front than you are from the back. I mean, assuming that you don't have someone tailing you. So if you hold square and press up on the left analog stick, you can actually shift power to your front shields that will take any additional shield power from your back and push it up towards the front of your ship. Now, this power that goes from doing the focus is going to be the equivalent of overcharging your shields. You can't go over that. So for example, if you've overcharged your shields and you push all power to the front, it's going to take away some from the back, but it's not going to deplete all of it. It's going to only go so much as that your front is overcharged. If you just press square, that will balance out your shields so they go back to the front and back equally. Shield management is a very important part of the game, as whenever you're doing dogfighting or if you're attacking a capital ship, the different situations will demand where your shields need to be, so make sure to keep on top of that and use your shield management effectively. Now, what about Imperial ships? They kind of got the shaft, right? Because they don't have shields, and so they can't even do shield management and put shields to the front or back. Why is that fair? Now, while the 3 Empire ships don't have shields, they do still have the emergency power converter system. This is extremely handy because if you hold square, this will allow you to immediately shift all of your power from your weapons to your engines or from your engines to your weapons. So if you need to make a quick getaway, you can shift all of your power away from your weapons, totally deplete your weapons, and give you boosts so that you can boost away. Likewise, if you really need to do a lot of damage really fast, you can divert all of your boost and engine power over to your weapons and get overcharged weapons that will deal additional damage and last for a longer amount of time. It is important to note that you can't try to break the game by switching back and forth all the time to fully overcharge them. The game was smart enough to know that, and so if you overcharge to your weapons, use your weapons a little bit, and then overcharge back to your boost, the boost will have a reduced charge until you're out, and then you can't redistribute power, as you should expect. The last thing to note on your HUD that isn't necessarily within your cockpit is the green square or circle that's going to appear around your enemies whenever you target them. If you have an auxiliary loaded that is some sort of guided missile, you will get a circle or square around your enemy that is indicating that you have locked on. The square will begin as a gray or white square and will home in on your target, and once it is fully homed in and is turned green or some other color, it will indicate that you are locked on and you can launch your auxiliary by using R1 or L1. Now, it is important to note that your enemy will get a notification that you are either locking onto them, have locked onto them, or have fired your auxiliary at them. You will receive that same notification when someone is locking onto you or fires an auxiliary at you. And if you want to counter that, you can use your countermeasures with Circle. That will deploy some sort of countermeasure like chaff or something like that that will try to disorient, confuse, or destroy the missile that is being fired at you. It's also kind of cool to note that if someone is firing, say, a proton torpedo at one of your friends or at your capital ship, you can actually even target the missiles and destroy them yourself, which is kind of cool. You can become your allies' countermeasures. Alright guys, that's all I've got for you today. That's just a very basic overview of your HUD, your cockpit, and just the very basics of getting familiar with the game. Hopefully you found this helpful. Like I said, if you did, please drop a like. It makes me feel good to know that you guys found this helpful. It also helps other people find this video. And if you feel so inclined, go ahead and hit the subscribe button and the notification bell, which will give you notifications for any new videos or live streams. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Thanks for watching.